I've just torn up all my notes because I tried to say what I was going to say this morning, and I got about 1/3 of the way through, and the 10 minutes was over, and it was only supposed to be 7.
7, yeah.
Okay. And I was worrying about my illustrations, which we are in a very visual world. I don't know if you all are, but probably if you're here. And we're architects and planners and do all the things that you said. And I really, first of all, I have to say I started here. Okay, my life started here. At the moment of graduation, I got on a bus and came to MoMA and got into the personnel office and asked for a job. There was no job to be had. The men had just come back from war. All jobs were taken. I knew that. I was going to be a secretary. And I had taken secretarial training during my last year at Vassar. Okay, good. I passed the test and I was in the secretarial pool. And the director said, go down the hall. There's a guy who needs you to take a letter. And I said, all right, and took my steno. That's all we had. And we did type also, believe me. This wasn't complete dark ages, but it was quite a while ago. And I walked in the office, and it was the Department of Architecture, Philip Johnson, director. And I was I was hired by Philip Johnson the next day, and I worked here for 4 years, and it was the most enlightening, and I could give you a wonderful story on that, as I could on Aspen. I didn't found Aspen, but I think I feel like I did, because Aspen started its functions exactly when I started mine outside of MoMA. I went to Whitney Publications, was an architectural editor on interiors, and that was 51 when the other things started. To talk when the great story about the mining town and all the things that they've done, which I can't tell you, but it's a great story. They did have, you just have to understand the density of talent that went into this just at the very beginning. The Pepkes were taken by this town. They fixed it up. They made it a place to bring friends to. They were from Chicago. And then in one moment, in a Germanic spirit, they said, we have to have a centenarian birthday for Goethe, because it was the Goethe centennial. And they got a few friends together, I think 40 or 50. Louis Kahn, Edgar Kaufman, Leo Leone, Stanley Marcus, Herbert Bayer, Joseph Albers, Theodore Jones. I mean, that was just a sampling of what they did. And all the conferences and all the meetings they had were just like that. The best people you can imagine ever, never being in the same room together and being given ideals of what to do. I can't tell you the story, but I really want to tell you the spirit of what happened at Aspen. I was not in the first two. In '53, I became editor of ID Magazine, or founded it, and so then I could talk to them, and then I could go to the conference. And so I became a trailer, of course, and then I became on some of the committees of making the programs. And therefore, I followed the thought and the process all the way along. And it would blow your mind to just read who went to each one of these conferences, who spoke at them. And there's a book coming out, by the way, which is not by me, that will tell this story, but it is an unbelievable story, because they were really after ideas. They were really after ideas for themselves and for others, and the Pepkes put this in this framework. It was after the war, and it had been a really dismal time. None of you can appreciate this. You're much too young. But it started in the Depression, and we grew up, saving things and doing as little as we could to spend money. And it was a tough time. We didn't know how bad it was. And then the war came, and then they took everything away. We had rationing. We had no materials. We couldn't travel, and everybody went with it. It was the good old American spirit. And when the war was over, they were ready for something really big and new and a different way of thinking about things. In any case, it eventuated in 53 in a big, I have the photograph of one of those very first conferences. And what you have to know is that this whole academic art world started like a university. It started like a row of people reading things at podiums. They didn't have visual aids. Like, they didn't even think about visual things or supports or products or other things. You read your thing, they take it away and they put it in a book. And the best people stood there in this wonderful picture, 6 people at this table. I could read their names, and they were all doing that exactly like it, because it was run like IBM. Watson was in the background, and it was certainly run like Harvard. So it was very formal, and the whole mood of this place was to break through that and do all the things that you're talking about wanting to do now, but they weren't being done then, which is sociability, new ideas, experimentation, and most of all, in the air, modernism, because modernism was with us. I was a born modernist, and I was going to carry the message along with everybody else. So they had these academic things, and they didn't have any technology to really work with it, and it was very corporate. Well, that couldn't last very long if a lot of smart people worked together, and of course they began to see that there was a larger world around them. And there was a moment, I think about the 60s, when they broadened the scope, and they started looking around and seeing that there were other people outside of them that they might be talking about, and they changed the formats of the meetings so that it was usually held in the hall that they had there until they got the big tent. The big tent came from the music people, and then the tent was the confining place. And then that was one of the great stories when Paul Friedberg and I were figuring out what to do on our 2 programs. There's no space out here. Everybody comes out on the lawn and looks around and says, who's who? We don't know who anybody is. We don't know the names. We don't know where they're staying, because there were 400 and 500 people coming to these conferences and looking for other people that they really didn't know the name of. So we said, let's do a little plaza here. So we couldn't build it. We couldn't buy it. Hay bales. Oh boy, have we got hay bales in Aspen, Colorado. And the farmers very happily came in, and we built, Paul and I practically single-minded, piled hay bales up and created a great plaza out there. And we got someone to come with the coffee and donuts and so on. And then, oh, well, people don't know. Then we got badges, and then we did books, and then we put people's names up and told where they stayed. And the whole thing suddenly began to gel. And that was the changing of intellectual scope went along with this. Presenters came from France and very many from Germany. We had a wonderful downfall from the Bauhaus, people now settling in the country. And then gradually, with giving fellowships to students abroad, they invited us over. And the whole committee, 19 of them, well, I didn't tell you that I got there, but I'll tell you that in a minute. We went to Britain, Norway, Italy, and Mexico, in each case with the associations that were in design, basically parallels to your design societies, and made conferences with them. So the whole thing changed. All right, what am I going to say? The whole theme of this was educating. The conference itself was the education, is really what the point is. It had a success factor, which was enormous. We know designers are temperamental and so on, but they have values, and the values are what was built into the subjects that they went after. So it was a sui generis thing. And I'll just tell you 4 things that I think made this. This is an organization that is like a family today, even though many of them are not still with us. But having people have long terms on a board, which this happened to 19 people, and they were elected until they were unelected. It wasn't a term, but the continuity and the sustainability was very successful. And then it helped the sustaining of ideas, because we did this last time. We did an Italian conference, but this time we know a lot more has happened. So your mind traveled with the ideas. There were a richness of attitudes and casual opportunities, but the informality of it, I really have to say that it broke down into a place where anybody could do anything. This was the dungaree conference of all times, and you had 1,000 people and sometimes 1,500 that came up there for a really good time. Finally, they brought their families, and it became a family place, and the kids grew up knowing each other. I mean, it was that long and that important, and the celebration side was terrific. Great parties, great picnics, and so on and so on. But anybody could talk to anybody. This is the premise, and you've certainly mentioned that that's what you're trying to do. I just want you to know we tried it, and it worked. It was fantastic, and it was the most, I can't say ecumenical, but democratic kind of intellectual meeting of minds and thinking on the grass and on the trips to the mountains and so on. So it was hard, it was long, and it took, we worked year-round on this. 1 week we had a conference, but we worked year-round. And it takes a lot of thinking and working, but if anyone can do it, and what I'm looking for is you have done it. I mean, we would have continued and perhaps gotten somewhere where you would have been, but it was a very strong foundation anyway for all the stuff you're doing.